Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. It's great to see so much interest and excitement about this event. I'm the managing director of Imagining America. My name is Stephanie Maroney, and I'm just really excited for today and the opportunity to hear from our wonderful guests. I'll just say briefly that you're all here as an event from Imagining America, and we'll get to hear from some longtime collaborators and members of IA. This is a part of our Teaching and Learning Circle webinar series, TLCs. And today we'll be talking about building collective leadership for culture change based on a wonderful book that we'll learn a lot more about. So it's my dear pleasure to hand it over to Maria, who will carry us through the rest of the event today. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. And hello, everyone. So, excuse me. My name is Maria Avila, and I'm really grateful to see all of you join us today. We only have 60 minutes, and we want to do our best to both give you a sense of what the book is about, including brief descriptions of two of the chapters by the chapter's co-authors, while at the same time, leave enough time at the end for a general discussion and Q&A. I and my three colleagues will talk, and then we will open for general discussion and Q&A. So please hold your questions, your comments until general discussion so that we can make the best of our 60 minutes together. So let me get started. So how did I end up organizing for culture change in academia? Let me start with a brief story. When I took the job as founding director of the Center for Community-Based Learning at Occidental College in LA in 2001, I had just left my job as community organizer with the IIF, or the Industrial Areas Foundation, the organizing network founded by Saul Alinsky in 1940 in Chicago. And all of a sudden, I found myself trying to figure out how to create a center that would focus on engaged teaching and research in a place where faculty didn't really see this type of scholarship as academically rigorous. And so I started doing one-on-one meetings the way that I learned in IF to build collective leadership with faculty so that together with them, we could change this part of the culture of the institution. And then I learned similar things about the state of engaged scholarship as I started going to local and national conferences. And a few years later, when I started my PhD and then my postdoc, my PhD at the University of Maynooth in Ireland, and then my postdoc at USC in LA, I saw similar things. And I also learned that faculty who were engaged with external communities through their teaching and research were not necessarily doing this as part of a collective and/or as part of an institutional strategy. What I mean is that for the most part, engaged faculty were working in isolation from their colleagues, much like what we know about culture of silos and fragmentation in academia in general. And I always remind us, this is very important to me, that this doesn't always happen in academia. You know, it's the way it is in society at large. So my organizing work in academia has been fueled by things that I have been learning about the ways in which engaged scholarship can contribute to enhancing democracy internally and externally, and focusing on building multi-stakeholder collective leadership to create more collaborative cultures in academia and with those with whom we partner. So in this book, I share how I did this that I just described in 5 research projects based on reflections with participants about the ways in which culture change happened in each of the projects and to what end. So I also wanted to use this book as an opportunity to explore writing with those who participated in my work rather than about them. And so I asked some of them if they would be interested in exploring this collaborative way of writing with me. Several of them agreed, and they wrote the chapters related to their specific projects. Most of my writing collaborators are faculty, and through our diversity of disciplines, we make reference to our research methodologies, our teaching, our pedagogies, and our community engagement definitions and approaches. The community partners who were part of the writing have worked in public education, electoral politics, policy, social services, and parent and student organizing. Two of the community partners wrote about their own experiences as engaged students. And because we were working on the book during the summer and fall of 2020, we all talk about the ways that the pandemic lockdown and the anti-racist movement led by Black Lives Matter influenced our work. Because this is a collaborative work, so all book-related events, I'm always joined by other collaborators. And today, I'm joined by 3 colleagues. I will introduce them briefly before they share about their chapters. So let me start with Celestina Castillo. She's the executive director of the Center for Community-Based Learning at Occidental College and one of the authors of a chapter about a regional cluster in Southern California. Celestina was my community organizing partner for 5 years through a regional network with educators we created around Occidental. And in 2009, she became my assistant director. When I left in 2011, she took over my role with the center. In 2020, she left to start a doctoral program at UCLA. And last year, when the position of director was reopened and now elevated to executive director, she applied and she was recently hired. To me, this is a great story, right? And her chapter in the book is about the Southern California Organizing Cluster I started in 2015 while I was on the National Advisory Board of Imagine America. And the cluster was affiliated to Imagine America until last year. Celestina joined the cluster from the beginning, and she will be sharing a bit about what she wrote in that chapter about her experience with the cluster. Celestina?
Thank you, Maria. I'll jump right into kind of what the cluster did for me. And, you can read more about it in the chapter, which is chapter 5, entitled Regional Organizing for Culture Change, which I co-authored with Alan Kinnear, George Sanchez, and Rissy Zimmerman. And so I agreed to be part of this cluster from the beginning because, as Maria explained, we had been working together for a long time through the Northeast Education Strategy Group initially, and as a community partner with the Center for Community-Based Learning. And I really appreciated the type of space that these regional organizing clusters or networks created, because it was really a space where you reflect with other people, where you build community, and where you really imagine what culture change looks like. And I want to just say that word imagine has become really important to me in a number of ways. In my PhD program, I am very influenced by Black and Indigenous feminists like Eve Tuck, Miranda Ballard Lewis, and Catherine McKendrick, who really use this idea of imagining different futures and building community and worlds kind of beyond what we are currently in. And it actually really connects with kind of the organizing training that I had when I was in the Northeast Education Strategies group with IAF that talked about the world as it could be. So that idea of imagining has really stuck with me. And so if you hear me use that word imagine a lot, that's why. So the concept of culture change was always really interesting to me because I think that it really drives to the root of why we do the things we do. I had learned and thought a lot about culture academia when I started working at Occidental. And of course, with Maria's mentorship, like really trying to understand, like, what is this space? It was the first time I was working in higher ed. And so I thought a lot about it. And when the cluster started, it made sense for me to be there and to be in conversation with other people about this idea of culture change. And it really took me a while to figure out what culture change could look like. And before I connected it with my thinking about imagining. And if I had to really think, have I ever seen this? Like, I don't know what this is. Like, it sounds beautiful conceptually, but I don't understand what it feels like, what it looks like. And so interestingly enough, though, at the same time, we were working with a group of, myself as a director, I have a faculty committee at Occidental, and we were starting to work on our Carnegie application for classification as a community engaged college. And the faculty were really interested in returning to incorporating language into the faculty handbook that would recognize community engaged teaching and research. And so we started that process, and we use an organizing approach to engage a broad range of faculty members and administrators to listen to their questions, their concerns, and their hopes for community-based learning and research in the tenure and promotion process. And this is a very slow and laborious process, but it is the way that you kind of build this collective ownership and leadership for anything that you're hoping to work towards or to change. And so, but it really was through the conversations with others in the cluster that I came to realize that the engagement process that we were using in itself is an example of culture change. Doing this slow process of talking to so many people about the changes in the faculty handbook before we took it to a faculty committee, before we voted on, like, that was just a huge process. It took over a semester, probably really a whole year. And then, I realized that also the unanimous vote that we received at the end of the process in May of 2016 was also an example of culture change. But it was really in the conversations with others in the cluster that helped me understand and articulate this process as culture change. And it is a very slow process, like I said, requires a lot of relational work, which we talk about a lot in the book as well. And the process and the change in the language was actually built on a number of small culture changes that Maria mentioned in her introduction while she was the director of the Center for Community-Based Learning. So this is very, and kind of ongoing assessment of the political landscape. So these are things that are slow, but are, in my mind, feasible. And finally, I will share that another part of this co-writing process was what was so wonderful, and also an example of the value of the cluster, was that through the process of co-writing, I realized that I have always from childhood looked to higher education as a place to find and to think and ideally act with others who are interested in social change. I was about 2 years old when my mother went to college, and I went with her. And she graduated when I was about 6 from the California State University at Northridge. And while she was in school, she was very politically active in student organizing, and I was there with her at every protest and meeting and fundraising party. There was a lot of fundraising parties, and the idea that college is actually a place where you meet and work with others who are interested in social justice was really cultivated in me as a child. But I really didn't know that. I didn't understand that until George, when we were writing, asked me about how I work with faculty and how I kind of explained to them the connection between the academy and the community. And I was like, there is no division. And I realized that as I was telling him my story, that is because this is something that was already embedded in me as a young child. But it's also what drives me to do the work in the way that I do it at the Center for Community-Based Learning, with faculty, with students, with community partners. And so that's what's just so important about this way of relational organizing and building collective leadership, and really kind of figuring out, like, wherever we're positioned, how can we contribute to culture change within and outside of our academic institutions. I'll stop there.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much, Celestina. Let me now introduce Joanna Perez. She's Associate Professor of Sociology at Cal State University, Dominguez Hills in Carson. which is where most of 3 of the projects in the book actually took place while I was there faculty. And this university is in the metropolitan area of LA. She is co-author of another chapter in the book. Joanna was part of the faculty learning community I created on campus. Really, I think it was the second one. And this one was with support of Faculty Development Center. And I really did it as a way to create awareness about Imagine America on the campus. And straight out as a strategy to get my campus to join as an institution, because as some of you know who are here in member institutions, it's not always easy to do. So we called the faculty learning community Imagining America Learning Community, so that it would be clear. There were 10 of us faculty members from various disciplines, and we created a collaborative space where we could learn with and from each other about integrating arts, humanities, or design assignments in our community engaged classes. Joanna can share more about her experience in this space and about the class in which she actually integrated arts and humanities. Really exciting one. So, Joanna.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for being here with us. So as Maria was mentioning, I had the opportunity to be part of this learning community, which is very important because, as folks may know, especially those that are faculty here, it's very hard to find the time and space to collaborate with other faculty, especially outside of our disciplines and in our departments. And so through this particular group and conversations, we started to think about how do we incorporate not just thinking about collaborative leadership and civic engagement, but also a lot of the things, right, that Imagine America does for us in terms of aligning ourselves with the commitment around thinking about social change and things of that nature. And so through this particular learning community, what ended up happening is we all kind of had conversations about cultivating spaces of learning that accounted for not just the needs of, let's say, the academy, but also the community organizations we were trying to work with. And so one of the examples that I collaborated on a chapter actually with another professor in anthropology, Sarah Taylor, and our chapter is entitled Reimagining Civic Engagement and Academia. And out of this particular project, what ended up happening was we began to talk about how do we come into the space, first of all. And so really understanding the importance of our own positionality. And for me, as a daughter of immigrants, I am part of a group of faculty that teach first-year seminars, in particular on our campus, that are based on interest areas that are very important to us, not just in terms of our research areas, but that we're very passionate about. And so as many of y'all know, currently there's a lot of push for supporting first-year students, particularly retention and things of that nature. And so what this particular class did for me was it allowed for me to bring in a little bit about myself as a daughter of immigrants. The class was entitled Undocumented and Unafraid. And so we talk a lot about different topics that relate to immigrant communities, particularly around youth organizing and the importance of really understanding how they contest the legality through different ways. And so their final project within this particular class was for them to really capture what the life of an immigrant is. And a lot of them what ended up doing is they interviewed someone that they admired, often a family member or a neighbor, things of that nature. And through that interview, we did a little bit of more ethnography type of work where they had observations, they collected archives. And at the end of the semester, what we ended up doing was we organized a photo exhibit, if you will, and they all kind of brought in their different projects. And one of the things that we wanted to, in connection to culture change, was oftentimes, even though these are public institutions, families are not really welcome necessarily in these spaces. And so what we did was not only did we invite obviously other folks on our campus, but their families, their loved ones to come. And oftentimes they were the ones that were displayed in this photo exhibit. And so it was something very meaningful in that it allowed for them to see that not only the importance of our narratives, right, but also that they belong there on our campus equally, just as much as the students, just as much as faculty and staff. And in addition to that, something that beautiful that came up through the students was that they were like, oftentimes our parents or our families don't get to go to like these community resources type of fairs and things like that because they're working or doing other things. What if we were to partner up with some of the folks on campus or even outside of campus and just make it a whole big event? And so that's what ended up happening. We started communicating with local organizations and specifically with the Dream Center on our campus. And we had like a mini resource fair while this exhibit was happening. We had food. And so it was an opportunity for folks to come together, not only to learn, but also to be able to just build community. And so in that, right, like it really changed not just how I approach my teaching, but also how I collaborate with other folks and really being more intentional about listening, right? What are the needs of the community and how do we use these spaces within and outside of academia to meet those needs? And in that process to really empower student populations that are often underserved. And so, through this particular project, it's been really great and has informed even the work that I do now. Currently, I'm serving as an interim faculty associate director in the Office of First and Second Year Student Experience. And so really thinking more critically about how do we approach like not only through our pedagogy, but also in thinking about civic engagement, collaborative leadership, and engaging in work that is going to be long-term, right? Not something that we can kind of just check off for the purpose of tenure, but something that's going to be meaningful and sustain the work that we do. And so with that said, I'll stop there, but look forward to our discussion later.
Thank you so much, Joanna. I tell you, writing collaboratively is not an easy thing. It's very, very challenging, especially when you've never done it before. And, we're inviting others to learn with you. But when I hear my collaborators like Celestina and Joanna, it makes it all worth it. And that's building collective leadership, right? Otherwise, how do we do it? Not by theory, not by talking, right? We got to do it. So let me now, last but not least, introduce Scott Peters. He's a professor in the Department of Global Development at Cornell University and former co-director of Imagine America. I invited him because he is co-founder and co-editor of Cornell's new book series, which is where the book is published. And I'll just let him share more with you about the book series. Scott.
Thanks, Maria. It's great to be here with old and new friends. So I'm putting into the chat a link to the book series that this book is published in, and we're very delighted that this is the very first book to be published in the series. There has been one other that has come out called Scholars in COVID Times. The next book to come out is a book that came out of Sacramento, California, a team of organizers and scholars, including Vajra Watson, who I'm sure many of you know. That's a book that will be called Faith Made Flesh, and that will be coming out soon. So the origins of this book series was in a Mellon Foundation supported project called The Scholar is Human, which gathered together scholars in the arts, humanities, and design fields at Cornell to invite them to think of how they connect their sense of humanity, their identity as a human being, to their work as a scholar. It was a very dynamic and powerful series, lots of really rich storytelling, many epiphanies people had. We ended up inviting the participants in that series to contribute a set of essays to a book, which is called The Scholar is Human. You can find that book on the link that I just put into the chat. That book is available for free public download. And the two editors of that book, which are Anna Bartel and Deborah Castillo, and me, serve as the three co-editors of the new book series. That book provoked us to see that there probably were lots of people around the world who might respond to an invitation to contribute something to a series that invites scholars to think of themselves as human beings as well as scholars, and also that understands that the work of scholarship, the work of being involved in building knowledge and theory, in the creative expression of knowledge and theory and discovery and teaching and learning, all of those things are being done by people, as Imagining America well knows, that are outside the academy, that are not professional academics or scholars. So I want people to look at that series and to think about who you might invite to contribute a proposal for a next book in that series. We have a contract to do 15 books. We've only we haven't even hit halfway point on that in terms of the books in the pipeline. So again, I'm just delighted that this book is the first one in that series that really does represent the aspiration we had in creating it.
Thank you so much, Kat. Well, with that, let's open up for comments, questions, and you can also use the chat. I just took a quick look at the John board and I saw 2 comments. I don't know if I'm missing the latest version of it, but it's open. Thank you all for being here.
Hi, my name is Lori Niffen. I'm at Fort Hays State University in Kansas. I just want to thank you all for spending time sharing about this book and writing it. I find it really interesting. I spend kind of part of my time in leadership from a collective perspective and part of my time in service learning and community engagement. And I feel it's rare to see those 2 things coming together, even though they naturally align. Matt, so thank you for your work. My question for you is you guys use the term collective leadership, and part of that is community organizing, but I'm wondering if there's other things that are informing your thoughts and practices around collective leadership.
Thank you, Lori. So something that comes to mind as I hear your question is that one of the things that I said at the beginning and that I discovered when I started doing this work is that community engaged faculty were doing this work in isolation and not as an institutional strategy. And I'm an organizer, so I can't help it, right? I just felt like, we got to do something about this and create this part of the culture. And so I just started doing what I was doing as an organizer, right? And looking for the potential leaders, the ones that were interested in being part of doing this together, co-creating something. That's how we created the Center for Community-Based Learning, really by doing it collectively. We co-created that center. And because I did that with faculty, it's the reason why it's still there after this many years. I left in 2011, Celestina left in 2020, and it's still there because of the ownership that we built with a collective faculty.
Thank you.
There's another question in the chat, Maria, about Alexis asked if you could talk more about narrative inquiry. What does that mean? And what is the connection to relational organizing and collective leadership?
That's a loaded question, Alexis, but I forgive you because it's you. I expect that from you. Alexis, by the way, wrote the afterwords of the book, and she also worked at Occidental with me for a few years, and we've been collaborating in many ways. So narrative inquiry came to me actually when I started working with Scott. Scott has been my writing mentor for a long time, since my very first publication. And if anybody knows about Scott Peters' work, he's big on story. And I was big on story through my organizing work. because I always knew that unless I was in touch with my story, I wouldn't be a good organizer. And that unless I got, to share my story and hear about other people's stories, I wouldn't find, strong leaders that would do this work for the long term. And then when I came to academia, I introduced that, and then I became more of a, more of a student, reading more about the theory about it, and then discovered that it is a way of knowing, right? That we learn a lot by sharing stories, and not just by sharing about my latest research project and my findings, but, learning, doing that through story. And in fact, that's how we did it in all of the projects, the 5 projects that, that I have in the book. We learned a lot with and from each other through stories. So that's what narrative inquiry means to me. And so that is also the relationship with, my relational organizing and building collective leadership. If I don't do this relationally through, learning about stories, through sharing my own story, then it's really almost impossible in my experience to build long-lasting collective leadership that can then, learn together and take action together when needed, right? About anything that we choose to try to change within our institutions and with the community partners with whom we work.
I just realized that we skipped Lindsay's question. Lindsay, would you like to come off mute and ask your question directly, or would you like me to read it?
Sorry,
Okay.
there's a couple of us here, so I'm actually going to defer to my colleague Carolyn Colvin, who posed the question.
Awesome, thank you.
I'm interested in what recommendations, advice you would give for engaging university administrators who often hold decision-making power. How would we engage them in collective leadership?
So it's a tough one. And honestly, thank you so much, Lindsay, for your question. It's a tough one, honestly. That's one of the other things that I discovered through my research, especially through my PhD and through my postdoc. The us and them that exists in academia. And honestly, I gotta keep reminding us, it's not just in academia, but we know it in academia, right? And it isn't just between faculty and administrators, right? It's all over. It's very fragmented, our institutions are. And so it is really absolutely the same way that I described. In fact, one of the 5 projects, the last one, chapter 7, was one that I did together with the Dean of Undergraduate Studies. Her name is Dr. Ken Castillo. He was pretty new on campus, and people kept telling us, you guys need to meet each other. And so we finally did. And I shared with her that I was just about to end the faculty learning community that Joanna was part of, and that we wanted to continue, but that we didn't, we needed support. And honestly, course release. Otherwise, we couldn't really continue doing, serious work. And she said, I want to work with you guys. I'm interested in exploring the possibility of integrating community engagement with general education. And I said, so let's meet, let's talk. And so we did. And she was part of this group, of this faculty learning community, thinking with us, learning with us. So really, what I can say is that they exist, and that the same way that I have been looking for faculty and from students, then, I also look for administrators and, presidents and committee partners, right? This is full circle, right? It's always looking for the ones that we can build that collective with. And in this case, it was 2 years that we worked with her. She was comfortable with the approach to come and learn together with and from each other. You know, some are, right, even if they're administrators, and she had been faculty, so I think that also has something to do with it. And so she would remind us, don't pressure yourselves to deliver sooner than we're ready. And I mean, that was music to my ears, because that's how I work. That's how I do all my projects. And so I was just really happy with that. And, you know, she was able to find us some support. And at the end, we ended up, you know, relationally, organically, and by sharing stories, and then later really bringing in our different kinds of skills as researchers, as everything else that we have, and bringing in other stakeholders, community partners, students, civic engagement professionals, so that we would have the multi-stakeholder, you know, space to do this together. So we ended up creating a minor civic engagement that now is there, institutionalized for all students to, you know, to go through, and also a part-time faculty position. So I'm with you. It's not easy, you know, it's not common, but it's there, and so it's possible.
There's a new question from Sean Crossland. Do you want to unmute, Sean, or?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So my question was around I guess the transferability. There's probably a better word for it. Thinking about how the learnings from your book transfer into different institutional and cultural climates. So I'm in Utah, which, you know, I think is safe to say has a fairly different overall political climate than than California, and more specifically, I think Occidental has a pretty significant history of organizing on campus, and not so much at Utah Valley where I am. So I'm just interested to hear more about kind of how you see the value and the transferability and those kinds of things.
So I wrote a first book in 2017, and in that book, I told the story of how I used 4 community organizing practices in 3 different institutions. And so one was Occidental College, one was Maynooth University in Ireland, which is completely different country and everything. And then the third one was USC, University of Southern California in LA, which is a giant of a university. It's a business, really, to be honest with you. Nothing else is anything else but a business. It's an R1 institution. It's the #1 private employer in LA. And so I tested everything that I tell you in this book, and that I told you all in the first book, in those 3 different kinds of institutions. And of course, at you know, Cal State Dominguez Hills, which of course is completely different as well, is public, is one of the 23 states in California. So the 4 practices can work anywhere. Really, that would be my, and of course, you know, we're here to help if needed. I see somebody else, Stephanie shared the link to the first book. Any comments? I mean, I'm also interested in hearing reactions, you know, thoughts about how does this sound to you all? You know, it's not just us experts here, you know, telling you how to do things, right? Because that's not even the point of the book, right? It's the opposite. It's think with us, talk to us about what about this triggers anything for you, for your context, you know, for what you're working on, what you're hoping to work on. Talk to us.
I just wanted to interject quickly before people share, Maria, is that I think that the question was about the first book, the Transformative Civic Engagement book. And so I put another link there.
Oh, thank you.
So yes, please share with us.
Okay.
Let's talk.
Can I share? Sandra Gutierrez, second year PhD student after most of my time in K-12 bilingual spaces. My university is in the process of developing like a funded kind of coalition within the university to do work that advances equity and literacy in partnership with community organizations and schools, not just K-12, but across communities, across ages, right? And I'm really excited about it. I'm really excited about its potential. And I also worry that some of the practices are reproducing the same old, top-down, technical assistance, we know better stuff that I've seen before, like from the community side. And I'm curious if you, Dr. Avila, could talk about how do we, and you know, there's a lot of like great intentions and committees and thinking through this, but how do you, from the design, embed the community organizing and the slow down and go deep and focus on relationships before like the deliverables, and let's do the IRB and let's do the how are we accountable, right? So like just thinking about what are some practices and strategies that have worked for you to kind of slow down the process and really think about what are we trying to do and what are we trying to honor if we're really committed to equity work.
I think I'm going to have Celestina take this one. If that's okay?
Okay, but if I miss anything, what came to me as I was listening to you is like, who are you? Who are your partners? Like, who is your collective? Who are your co-conspirators? Sometimes we say, like, and doing the one or finding them. Like, how do you find them? And it's really through one-to-ones with people. And asking them like, so why are you doing this? Like, what is this interest? Like, how does this interest you? It's going back to the stories of people and why they do it. And then you become a collective, right? And you become a collective that it's not just you fighting to slow that down. It's a collective of people, you know? Yeah, so I think that it is those one-to-ones with people, the stories, and then beginning to build that collective leadership so that you're not doing it by yourself. Yeah. And you're doing it with the kind of the folks who will respect doing it in that way as well.
Does that help, Sandra?
It really does. I think it's just, you know, it's interesting sometimes when you have like the funding and like this is a huge initiative, sometimes the pressures are bigger. Like in a way, like I've been more like student organizing stuff where we're just starting from zero and we just like bring it up to the top and advocate from like what people are just saying. And in a way, like you have more ownership of that process than when it's like this grand project that is now funded, because funding has strings attached. So I'm just reflecting on my context, but it does help because even within that context, there are different communities that can be brought in and mobilized. So any other comments, I'm really happy to hear. I know I have another colleague who's working in this project with me here, so we're here to learn.
And I would just add to me, I mean, with power, right? Whoever is in charge of that grant, whoever wrote that grant, right? Whoever got those grants, and what was their vision? What was their thinking, right? So that they also become involved in the process. And so it's not so much that you're like pushing against them. You can push against them, but just that you're figuring out like, so where can we meet halfway? Where does this, where can we help you meet whatever you need to fulfill this grant to whomever is funding it, but also do it in a way that is intentional and thoughtful and true to the values that you believe in. Yeah.
Veronica Toledo, can I ask you if you have any comments about this? Veronica was a student at Occidental when I was there. She's in my first book, and she's been working with schools and with parents for a long time, organizing. I don't know, do you have any comments, Veronica?
I mean, I feel your pain, Sandra. I think that I have frequently received organizing grants, but they don't want to use the word organizing even, right? I mean, I think there's a whole thing in fundraising that is against community organizing. And I think in terms of the pressure that you are feeling, I think it makes a lot of sense. But I think Celestina is spot on. And I think using the relational one-on-ones that we've been talking about this whole time with the grant maker, with, as many people as you can to build buy-in from the outset. And I think really, I think it's just a different form of building from what you were doing before in terms of building from the ground up. It's definitely tough, but I think those one-on-ones and the more of the relational meetings that you can have, the more of them will begin to sort of shift mindsets and make it easier for you.
Thank you. Any other comments, words of wisdom for us, or, ways, that you've done this kind of work before and you want to share with the group? Anybody?
I think Rula had hand up.
Yes.
Oh, really? Go ahead.
Thank you so much, everyone, for amazing insights and energy. It really is motivating me to listen to you. I feel like I'm in among my own family now, and I want to say you bring energy, you bring focus into this book and in the stories that you have shared, and it reminds me about some earlier organizing or work that I've done with some colleagues to teach across all kinds of lines of difference, for instance, in the class and connecting with communities, working on what integrated content material about cultural encounters, connecting with communities. But then you mentioned at one point about the political spectrum that's out there and how that sometimes drives or provides those kind of barriers that it feels insurmountable at points of times. Some of those barriers cause some of these classes, the whole general education system, for instance, that to shift from being more interdisciplinary, more hands-on, more connected with thinking and engagement and so forth to something different, and we keep going back and forth, and so words of wisdom about keeping the momentum. Now we are in a place where expert language is so we can't call it service learning and engagement. Colleagues who are very much into design build, that's what they want to use, but that design build is not necessarily engaging community. It's not necessarily about all of these other things that you were talking about. So how can we sustain and keep the momentum and at the same time appeal and be relevant to our colleagues, that especially newer colleagues into the academy? And thank you.
Thank you for your question. Let me invite Joanna and Scott to see if they have anything they want to share about this.
This is I'm thinking, so I'll come back.
But the reason why I thought of you, Joanna, is because you and I were non-tenure when we were doing this work, when we were writing this book. And we went through all of that. In fact, most of us faculty in those projects, because 3 projects are on campus and 2 are off campus, right? And most of us faculty involved in those projects were not tenured. There was one who was associate professor, who was still not tenured, Nancy Deng. And the rest of us were not. And we were navigating, right, with a lot of the things that you're mentioning there, in the politics and the institution and in our departments, of course, who doesn't know that one? And yet we went through it. And by the time we finished the book, several of us had gotten tenure. I think most of us had gotten tenure, right? And we, we figured it out. But really, I think I mean, you know the answer I'm going to give, right? The reason for that is that we spent the time and energy and carved that time and energy outside from everything else that we were doing to create this space where we could have what Joanna described, right, when she was sharing about her chapter and her project, the kind of place where we could come and really relax, which none of us have a lot of that anywhere in our lives, honestly. And so we knew that we could come to this space and not have to, impress anybody with our expertise or with anything, but really talk about whatever was in our mind before we start getting down to business, or share the story of your latest, plant that you bought, or your children, or whatever. And then through that, we would work our way through the project itself. And so I just think it's really what's really missing to me big time in our democratic society, and therefore in our institutions that are supposed to be democratic, is those kinds of spaces where we can experience being different than we're forced to be in most spaces, right? I mean, in academia, how many of us faculty, came with the best of intentions, or that's how, Sandra, you're doing your PhD, right, in mind. And then we get there and it's not what we thought we would have. Those are those are the parts of the institution, and then we have to start building collective leadership to reflect together and to talk about, is there something we can do? Like Celestina did, right, with the tenure and promotion on her campus. And it's not that we're going to transform the entire institution, but, carving out what seems to be realistic, what's urgent, what can we do in this group, and then take action. Because to me, nothing is most dreadful and draining than not having a group of people with whom you can do something about it. Talking about it is fine, venting, we need to do that, but to actually figure out what to do about something, that's oxygen to me, that's energy, and that creates, the sense that we don't have to put up with everything that we often put up with, and not just in our institutions, honestly, really, look around you in society, right? Our democratic societies, right? So I don't know, I hope that helps, Avila.
Absolutely,
And Joanna,
thank you.
And Joanna, I think that resonates with you, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So we have 4 minutes left. If there are any final comments or questions, bring them up. A nice comment there from Leslie. Somebody who's trying to do similar work finds it helpful. Thank you for your energy and life force. Looking forward to reading the book. Thank you for an energizing, engaging, and relevant work, motivating. Thank you, Lindsay. Somebody's recommending the book highly. Any final thoughts, any final comments before we close? We're good? But thank you all very, very much for joining us today. And I hope we continue finding ways to work together in the future. And thank you, Imagine America. Thank
I
you,
wanted to
Scott,
especially thank Maria. Yes, thank you so much. And really to your wonderful collaborators. I appreciate Joanna and Celestina and Scott, your time and sharing this wonderful work with us. And we shared it out through our newsletter, but you can go to the IA website and find a link to buy the book there and learn more about this really important work. And we are grateful again for you finding this place to share it with the IA network. And it was great to see so many members in this meeting and see the connections that are possible. So I appreciate it.
Can I
Thank you.
just thank you, Stephanie? Can I just before we leg out mention that somebody Danielle Leon just shared that UC Santa Cruz has updated the expectations for assessing community engaged scholarship. So it's a good one for all of us to click on. And with that, thank you all very much, and you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you, Scott, Celestina, Joanna.
Thank you, Maria.
Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you, IA.